Welcome to another episode of Exit Philosophy with Mal Ramanan and Rich Griffin. And we've got a lot to talk about this week. We've got the situation with your St. Catherine's team, your summer league team, we'll talk about. We missed Bob Uecker's passing last week,
Yeah,
just as we were recording, but I got a good story about that. There was the Hall of Fame announcement. We'll get into that. And of course, the big signing of Anthony Santander by the Blue Jays, and
yes.
we'll talk
We got
about
to fish.
what the new lineup might look like, whether they're going to have any addition. We'll get into all of that. But first, your update. I mean, this is a big part of your baseball life moving forward. This St. Catherine's College eligible
Yep.
summer league team. Tell us about it.
Well, I mean, we're just basically in deep plugging away. I'm not sure if I have anything, massive to announce. As like I mentioned, the press conference on February 6th will unveil the team name, and obviously that'll be something we'll share with everyone and share here. Been busy. I'm sending out player offers, trying to nail down some players, obviously, and look at coaching options. Meeting with sponsors, and the mayor heavily involved with that. Doing a lot of media. Obviously, see my shirt. I got a new logoed shirt for the company. So, some hats. So just getting that logo out there, and obviously, when we get the team name, that will be what we feature predominantly. But it's kind of been business as usual, just locking up sponsors and uh, taking meetings and doing all the things you need to do. Sorry, behind the scenes and just plugging away. So it's been fun and lots to do before we get moving here. So just lots to do and trying to do it all.
Mal, I got two pieces of advice for you. One of them is, could you lower the, because I can't see, there you go. That
Yeah,
was number one. Number two is, with that logo, you better win some damn games.
it's
You
hard to
can't,
be tough when you have that tough logo and
you
you get
can't
beat
have that tough
3.
logo and be like 2-33 or something.
Yeah, yeah. We don't win, but we kick the snot out of you on the way out.
Um, which brings me, doesn't just bring me, but I wanted to talk
Right.
about Bob Uecker and
Yeah, that was a
what he meant.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, he meant something to everybody who was in the game. What were some of your encounters that you had with him? Because I've got a story that I want to tell.
Surprisingly, I don't have a lot, obviously, other than, brief conversations in the you know, press box, because I mean, the guy worked right till the end, right? So,
Yeah.
Euchre was always around, and he's just fun to be around, and just watching how people idolized him there, and just he was just the king there in Milwaukee. So, that's just I don't have any specific. I didn't really spend a lot of time with him like you probably did, being in Montreal and just being around longer than I was in those situations, but just just seeing how revered he was, and obviously from growing up as a kid was when Euchre started making his presence known in a media fashion, doing Carson and all those things, and you just you got to love his self-deprecating manner. But yeah, it was just fun to be around. What's your experience?
Yeah, my story ends with me making Bob Uecker laugh out loud, which is a highlight.
Really,
It's got to be a
really,
highlight.
that's
So it's the 89 World Series, the earthquake in San Francisco
yeah,
happens just before game three at Candlestick Park. So the next day, I'm in a cab headed to Sausalito. There's no power in San Francisco. There's still no electricity, no power. Sausalito, right across the Golden State Bridge, and the Golden State Bridge was
beautiful spot,
built like
beautiful spot.
the Buffalo Bills defense to bend but not break. And and so I'm in this cab going across. I have to go to a pharmacy and get some medication. I was having problems with stomach ulcers at the time, which weren't helped by being in the middle of an earthquake. So
Yeah,
I go
or
across and I
sure you didn't
convinced,
stop drinking beer either.
yeah, well, that was the problem, beer and fried food. So I convinced the pharmacist to give me my medication, even though I don't have a prescription. And so I'm back in the cab coming back across and talking to a friend about uh, maybe finding a place that's serving beer that night, even though there's no power.
Now that
And
you got your medication, you're
yeah,
good. Yeah.
the cab driver turns around and says, I know a place. It's on the edge of the Marina District. And I heard they're going to be serving beer tonight. So I said, fine. So we go to that place around 7 o'clock, and they got a giant cooler full of Miller Lite on ice, and they got their own generator. So there's about 30 people sitting in mostly in the dark, but in the corner, and they're going to show Major League, the movie.
Oh,
Major League came out in April of 89. So all these people, the 30 or 40 people, had clearly already seen the movie. So I'm sitting there, I'd never seen the movie.
right.
And so we're sitting there, and they only take cash for the beer, and you total it at the end of the night. You tell them how many you drank, and
Yeah.
then you give them the money. So Major League starts, and they're treating it, because this was supposed to be the night of Game 4 of the World Series. So they're treating it like it's the World Series game. They're cheering at the intro. They're cheering wildly
Wow,
all
that's
the
fun
game.
actually. Yeah.
And like every time there's a hit on the in the game on the screen, they're standing and cheering, like, they're cheering the Indians are their home team
Yeah.
because they're in San Francisco and it would be the Giants. And so they get to Ricky Vaughn throwing and hitting the backstop, and everybody, all 40 people yell, just a bit outside. And like, I thought that was hilarious that they would all know that line.
Right.
Years later, I'm at Miller Park, and I'm coming out of the game after writing, and Bob Uecker is waiting for his car service. So I go over and tell him the story, because everyone knows Bob Uecker was the announcer in Major League who made that
Correct. Correct.
call.
Yeah.
And I set up the story. I told him the story, and he laughed so hard.
No way.
I'm thinking, wow, I made Bob Uecker laugh. And now it came back to me after his passing. And that's the highlight I'm going to remember of me and Bob Uecker.
Anybody who makes Bob Uecker laugh has done something right. That's for sure.
Right. So we had also this week, just the other day, the Hall of Fame announcement, and we had been discussing who would
Yep.
go. And so I think it was pretty clear that joining Dick Allen and Dave Parker, who were going in with the Veterans Committee, would be Ichiro and Sabathia. I'm not sure what you thought of Billy Wagner, but there are some others. What were your thoughts when you saw that Billy Wagner made it and that Ichiro was not unanimous?
Well, I'm the whole closer thing. I think we're at a point now where we're recognizing the value of a closer, and I think we've gotten past the lack of innings. I think there was a time when, even not that long ago, where closers, it was hard to get them, you know, the recognition they deserved. I mean, when you look at Billy Wagner's numbers, other than a couple minor blips, injury stuff, I mean, he couldn't be more dominant, even right to the end. His last year, you're wondering why he gave it up. He was still excellent. I think he posted a 140 ERA in his
Yeah.
final year. So, I mean, that's saying something. Personally, I know we've talked about it. I think the real question is Sabathia getting in like that. Like, uh, you can look at his numbers compared to a lot of other pitchers, and it's very, very similar. And other guys don't even get a sniff. You know what I mean? And that's where you get that people create that Yankee bias, right? Of
Yeah.
playing for the Yankees. I mean, I'm fine with him getting in, but you can make a case for others that didn't even get a sniff that have similar numbers to Sabathia. I love CC Sabathia. He was dominant, workhorse, pitched deep into games. And I think that's the kind of stuff people remember. That stint in Milwaukee, just pitching every few days, So, I mean, I'm fine with him getting in, but if there's one question, it's his, getting in right away, I think is the surprise for me. Now, the Ichiro thing, I don't know how you feel. Doesn't bother me at all. It just doesn't bother me at all. I think when you're just taking it all too seriously. I mean, sure, I can't imagine not voting for him, so I don't know what the reasoning would be behind that. But I mean, sometimes I kind of like the mystique of it all, that it's just, there's only Mariano, right? So I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it. It just doesn't. He's in. He got in. He got he got almost all the votes. I'm fine with it. I don't know how you feel about the Ichiro thing.
Yeah, the Ichiro thing, I believe that
Hmm.
obviously everyone should have voted for him, but the fact that one person didn't doesn't bother me that much. But I what I would do is not try and investigate and find out who it was, because I think that person in this day and age wants the notoriety of being the only one who didn't vote for Ichiro. And it's like when TV networks decided not to show streakers and invaders, fans invading the field. They would just go back to the booth and talk to the broadcasters. And that takes away some of the oomph that these people have of, hey, talking to their friends and saying, "Hey, did you see me on TV? I jumped the fence and
Yeah,
ran out there and got pummeled
yeah,
by the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
guards."
Yeah.
So if you don't identify this guy who did not vote for Ichiro, then it won't happen again, as far as I'm concerned. If they, unless he comes out and says something. But I think that in this day and age, and with the information available, everybody would have voted for Ichiro unless you're doing it for a certain purpose. And I think that purpose by that voter was notoriety. So I wouldn't give them that notoriety. I would not even ask who it was. I wouldn't even investigate. So that's
Let me
my
ask
feeling
you,
on that.
do you think there's ever a situation where through the BBWA, where somebody says, I want to ensure that there isn't a unanimous, like, and Ichiro would have been the guy if you ask me. Is there any thought where somebody says, there's Mariano there, and I want to make sure that this guy isn't a unanimous selection? I mean, is that possible, or maybe
Yeah.
the guy just missed his
Well,
name? I don't know.
up until ballots were revealed and there was
Yeah,
more transparency, there were several writers, veteran guys, who would send in a blank ballot because it
right.
counted. So, you know that nobody's going to be unanimous because you just send in a blank ballot. And that was while I was still, or that was when I was starting to vote, and it pissed me off because, like, come on, it's the same.
Right.
But they weren't doing it for notoriety. They were doing it to preserve the integrity of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and all those people.
Right. So I guess that's what I'm asking. Do you think that would be a more likely scenario? A veteran guy, maybe he's preserving that integrity, or maybe he's opposed to, Clemens and those guys, like just some guys still being on the ballot, or maybe he thinks they should be in some sort of personal protest is why
Well,
someone sent in a
I
blank
would,
ballot.
I might agree with it, except that uh, they must have voted for Mariano because he was unanimous.
That's right. That's
Like, I
correct.
mean, if that's going to be it must be a recent sort of epiphany of, hey, I could do this because
Yeah,
he
fair
voted for
enough.
Mariano.
Fair enough. Fair
Um,
enough.
yeah, so there's that, and there was a suggestion on MLB Network that maybe it was a Yankee writer, and like the retired guys still have a vote if they're around the game, and you got to be a 10-year minimum
Right.
BBWA member. So the suggestion, so that means there's a preponderance of voters in the New York area because a lot of guys retire and don't die. Um, but, but that somebody wanted Mariano to be the only unanimous, so he said, Ichiro, I'm not going to vote for him.
Maybe. I
Or it
think those
might have
are more
been
likely scenarios than just the notoriety. You know what I mean?
might have been a World War II veteran who still held Pearl Harbor against the Japanese.
That's what I mean. There could be various explanations for this. Various that might be the smartest one, yes.
But CC Sabathia, his inclusion, I mean, you mentioned it. You mentioned his year-end finish in Milwaukee, where he took
Yeah.
the ball. They were struggling. They might not have been making the playoffs, and he said, "I'll take the ball every fourth day instead of every fifth day down the
Yep.
stretch."
and pitched
And
his
to
ass off.
me, that's the separator, because we've talked about it before on Exit Philosophy. We've talked about the extra paragraphs that are in the voting instructions that don't just include stats, just
Right.
don't include comparing CC Sabathia to Andy Pettit and to other guys like that. So there's that end of season in, I think it was '08. Then there's my observation, and I've talked to you about this before, is like when he was a Yankee, just the wave after wave in the postseason, post game of media going to his locker and 24 other guys in the room looking at CC Sabathia, their leader, and seeing him handle wave after wave of the same questions. But because certain groups couldn't hear his original answers, he's available. He's available. And to me, that's part of being a Hall of Famer. That's part of representing the game. There was his
I agree with you. I agree with you.
struggles with alcohol and his ability to rehab with the help of his wife Amber and his kids. It's all part of the big picture of CC Sabathia, and with CC, it was a very big picture.
And in fairness, these are the things the fans don't get to see. And obviously from a fan perspective, you're dealing with half the information all the time, and that half is just the production on the field. So the only thing you ever see fans do, and that's all they can do, comparing numbers to numbers to numbers to numbers, right? And Sabathia was the horse of all horses. He just was. He was a throwback. Um, and you just don't see that anymore. It's just not part of the game, and you're not even allowed to do it, type thing. So I agree with you. I mean, but when you're looking at it, that's where I could say, okay, like look at his numbers compared to Dave Steves. Look at them compared to Mark Burley's, two guys that pitched here. They're not dissimilar. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
not dissimilar. But I agree with you that the stuff like that, he was just a horse, man, and I loved it. I loved him as a pitcher.
As far as Billy Wagner is concerned, I've never been a relief pitcher guy
Right.
until now,
Me
and
neither.
I remember talking to Pat Henkin outside the bar in the hotel in Baltimore the year that
Always outside the bar or in the
yeah,
bar.
that's my
Where the best
studio.
stories come from.
That's my studio. But yeah, so I was talking to Pat, and he was up for the Cy Young Award that year, and he did win it. But we were talking about relievers, and he scoffed and he said, "Relievers, they're just failed starters. They shouldn't even be considered for the Cy Young Award." And then I threw this in his face, threw this conversation in his face when he became the Jays bullpen coach.
That's right. And Pat would have loved that too. I mean, there's no better dude out there. He would have laughed hard too.
But if you're talking about Hall of Fame and pitching, it used to be that when guys were horses in the rotation going 7 to 9 innings, that would take the lion's share of my attention in terms of voting for the Hall of Fame. But
Right.
now, you mentioned it in your answer, now it's almost like a 60-40 with starters and relievers. So that means that
Yep.
relievers should get 40% of my attention. And I think that I voted for Bruce Sutter because he was a 2 and 3 inning closer. He was one of the
Right.
first 2 or 3 inning closers where he would end up in the ninth, but he might have pitched the eighth and the seventh.
Yeah, all those Raleigh Fingers, Goose Gossage types, right? Multiple innings.
Yeah, so Billy Wagner was a strictly ninth inning guy. I
Yeah.
love the story that he fell on his right arm. He was a right-hander, fell on his right arm. The kid fell on him playing football in the backyard, and he had to learn to throw with his left arm, and now he's going to the Hall of Fame. That, to me, is a pretty good story,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And, he retired, as you said, early. I think he had a 1.38 ERA his final season at
It was
37
something
years old.
ridiculous.
37 years old, and he went home, retired, had done enough, 900 plus innings as a closer.
16 years.
And now his son, Will Wagner, is probably going to be the DH slash second baseman slash third baseman for the Blue Jays. So
Correct.
must have gone home to teach him how to play ball. He didn't teach him how to play defense.
Well, Billy didn't know how to do that either. So
Oh, that's true.
never,
Yeah,
one
they got that.
in the Wagner family there
So
for sure.
just wrapping up our Hall of Fame discussion here. Next year, so there's a chance for Carlos Beltran. I think that some
Yeah.
people are penalizing him for being a big part of the Houston Astros cheating scandal. But in that case, all the New York Giants who were there when Bobby Thompson hit the home run should be precluded because they were cheating from the scoreboard. So, you know, so Carlos Beltran, I've been voting for. Andrew Jones, best center fielder maybe
Should be
ever.
in.
Yeah.
Should be in. Andrew Jones should be in. I don't understand that one
Like I
personally.
talked to Terry Francona in my conversation, which if you haven't heard it, if anyone watching this podcast has not heard the Terry Francona, you got to go and tune in. This guy is going to be a future Hall of Famer as a
Yes.
manager.
Yes.
And he loosened up. It was a fun conversation, so you'll enjoy it. But he was making a case for Dustin Pedroia seriously. What do you think of Dustin Pedroia?
He got cut short. I mean, Pedroia was such a gamer, man, and he was a guy you feared coming up in a clutch situation. But for me, his numbers fall short. His career cut short too quick for Hall of Fame consideration. So I get why, if he played for you like he did for Terry, I get the love, and I on every level. But I think when you take the step back and the bigger picture, I just don't think he makes the cut personally. That's just my opinion. I don't know what you think.
No, I didn't vote for him, and I don't think I will because of those things that you're talking about. But I did ask in my own way, Terry Francona, when he went through the Dustin Pedroia, I said, "You guys are famous for playing cribbage every day in your office. Who would lead the all-time series?" And he got like very serious, and he said, "Well, I'm sure Pedroia would, I'm sure PD would tell you that he was leading, but he's full of shit." I went, "Wow, I touched a nerve here."
Old wounds, as they say. That's funny, hey?
Yeah, so next year's class is not going to be class of first year players is not going to be that.
What is that? Ryan Braun, maybe that
Yeah,
type.
Ryan Braun is
Cole
one.
Hamels.
That's right. Those are the two biggest names, and I'm not sure either
Utley.
one's a
No,
Hall of
he's already
Famer are
there.
going to
Sorry,
go
sorry.
in. So
Yeah,
it's an opportunity for those who have been in the runner-up position in the past couple of years.
Beltran, Andrew Jones need to probably
yeah.
go in. Yeah.
And so we're talking now about, we'll get back to the Blue Jays and the Santander, Anthony Santander, who exit philosophy. We have been talking about him since the season ended.
Right.
But not as the first option, but those first, second, and third options, as we've discussed in the past, the Blue Jays usually finish in the bronze medal position. But in this one, and even when they signed, the Hoffman, that was after the Orioles and Braves had failed them in there. So they did finish third in that. But in Santander, apparently
they drove him to Toronto for him.
According to Ross Atkins, they've been dealing with Santander since November, which is basically the start of free agency.
Right.
He said they've had a Santander uniform number 25 in the office since November, which might have upset Dalton Varsho because that was his number.
Right. Did they clear that? Yeah.
I don't know. He's now number 5, by the way, which was John Gibbons' number.
That's correct. I don't know if that's okay.
I don't know either. We'll have to ask Gibby. We'll have to have him on exit philosophy again. That was another highlight show.
That was. Go back and check it out.
Santander finally agreed. And obviously, he's the sort of player that the Blue Jays needed to solidify the middle of the lineup, but it's getting a lot of criticism. It's not 100% support and rah, rah, rah. 5 years, $92.5 million with an estimated $32 million deferred. And so it comes out to about 14.5 million minus that 32. So
Right.
it's a contract for a guy who hit 44 home runs. I don't think his defense is as bad as critics say it is. I don't think he's as slow as Alejandro Kirk. And granted, his exit velocity average is pedestrian in the middle of the pack. And he might swing and miss too much. But what do you think of the signing and the fact that
Quite all those
they
things.
have no? He drove in 102 runs, and I
I
know
agree with you.
RBIs don't matter as much, especially the Orioles where they have all those
Yeah,
studs at
yeah.
the top of their
It might
order,
be
and they were
tougher
getting
here.
on base. Yeah, it's like a Joe
I
Carter 102 RBIs. You know?
look, if you go, it's like if you go back to the start of free agency, and we were talking about it, Santander was one of the guys we talked about that they should add. He's that type of player that would fit this lineup and is exactly what they need. I don't care about his defense right now. Like that, like enough for the defense stuff with the Blue Jays. Like they got room to add a guy like this. So I understand. It kind of feels though at this stage like it's your fourth and fifth choice of where they were at. So I think that's where the criticism's coming from. And I understand it's like, oh, we got the leftovers now. Well, regardless, it's still one of the guys we thought at the start of spring free agency that they needed to sign. So I think it's a good signing. I think it's a very good signing for this team. I think he fits everything they desired in the offseason. The criticism isn't the signing, it's whether this is it. It's whether, what else can you do? This on its own isn't going to be enough. But I don't know how you can criticize other than the length of the deal. Hey, this could turn out to be another Springer type deal where you could see there are warning signs where it maybe, could be a problem, the defense, the speed, the swing and miss down the road. But I mean, hey, that's free agency. That's how this goes. You deal with that. You deal with that later if you're smart. You know what I
Now,
mean?
now
I
there's
think it's a
one,
very good signing for this club.
yeah,
I
there's
don't know
one,
what there is to criticize.
there's one thing that pisses me off about fan bases and about baseball in general these days. And I know it's getting younger, but it used to be when I was starting out and even through the early 21st century, the first decade, that people considered that the career best years were 28 to 32 years old. Now that
Right,
Santander's 30 years old and everybody's saying, oh, he's too old. His contract might come back to bite you.
right.
Be 35 at the end of it. 35 to me, well, as we get older, everybody looks good who's
Those
younger.
were good days for us, Griff. Those
Yeah,
were those were prime days. I got to
but
tell you.
30 years old is not old. And people go, wow, he's 30 and he's past his prime. You're giving him all this money. The contract is pretty damn good for a guy who turned down a qualifying offer, which is more than his average, even if you consider 5 years, 92. That's less than 20 million a year, just straight up. And the
Yep.
qualifying offer was over 20 million. So to me, that is not a bad deal at all. And if you want a glove out there, you can put Miles Straw out there late innings.
For
You're
almost the
paying
same
him
money. For
you're
almost the
paying
same
him
money.
$5 million this year. You might as well throw him out there. So
And that's just the game in free agency anyways. Like free agency isn't a place to get, deals like that. Those are what you do for the players you already have. You if you want the guy, you got to go get the guy sometimes, right? And you just gotta. That's just the price of winning and competing. So I think it's a great signing. It's just the question now is now what? Now what?
that
Because they
that
put themselves in a hole with the Miles Straw Sasaki stuff,
yeah.
and that's the question I have. So
So my question to you, and it plays off something that you said earlier in this discussion, is that the Jays now, after even averaging the Santander contract at around 14.5 million, the Jays are pretty much exactly matching payroll wise what they were They got
Correct.
13 players under guaranteed contracts at 169 million. 7 arbitration guys, including Vlad, that settled, and they're at 48 million. And 8 more players because 2 of those guys are IL. 8 more players to fill out 26 at 1 million each. That's 8 million. So they're pretty much exactly where they were on opening day. And you had a strong belief that that is where they have to stand. So according to ownership, according to the policies that have been consistent with Rogers, and that precludes getting guys like Pete Alonso and Bregman.
It's just my opinion, and I'd be happy to be proven wrong because contrary to popular belief, I'd like to see them really do well and compete for the fan base. Um, I think they're done. I think they're done with any major signings like the Alonsos, the Profars, or whatever. Unless something's radically changed, that's not how public companies work. That's not been my experience, and I'm sure it's not yours. Um, and Mark was very clear that they're going to be in the similar position, and they're there now. So I'm sure there are tweaks they can do, or if there is any major changes, they're probably got to come via the trade market. You know what I mean? And you mentioned this before, if they do add they can do that, but they're going to have to find a way to get under the budgeted number at some point, i.e., trade deadline. So knock yourself out if you want to add somebody, but you're not going to be able to stay at that level because I mean, there is a limit to spending. I know fan base thinks there isn't, and I understand why with the pursuit of Soto and Otani and all that, which we've talked about ad nauseum of why they've separated that. But as it stands now, I think they're finished. I don't think there's an Alonso or a Profar coming down the pikes.
Yeah, the luxury tax threshold is one thing, and we don't deal with that when we're talking about it. We're talking about contracts that a guy signs, the number that he sees on the contract, and what it means for 2025 season. That's what we're talking about, because the luxury tax number has gone up, I think, 12 million.
Right.
And the Jays, and that includes all the benefits that are there, like hotel rooms and meal monies, and it also includes apparently $1.6 million that they sent to the Pirates. So that's on the 25 Blue Jays. So there are different factors involved, but the key, as you pointed out, is that they need to stay under that luxury tax threshold. And to get there, they can do like they did last year at the deadline and trade veteran guys if they feel like they're not in it and
Right.
get under that number. But you said earlier that you don't think that just if they're hovering around contending as wild cards, that that's good enough for Rogers ownership to change their mind about a policy that they've had forever.
It's not how it works. I mean, and that's not how publicly traded companies work. You negotiate that budget and you manage it any way you like. However, it ain't changing. You just don't go back in the middle of a fiscal year and adjust the budget, ask for more money. Doesn't work that way. It's up to you to manage it properly.
Okay, here's my opening, not opening day, because I've got Dalton Varsho healthy here.
Yeah, okay.
Here's my lineup. Suggested I'll go three, the top three, middle three, bottom three. I'll go top three. You discuss what you would do, whether you agree or not. I would go Springer right field, Bichette shortstop, Guerrero first base.
Uh, okay. I mean, obviously, the issue I think everybody would have, and I have, is Springer batting leadoff. However, there's a dearth of options. So
That's my thinking too.
here's I'm going to agree with you only because the game's not played on paper and they're played by human beings. But would I like to see a Will Wagner get a shot of that if he's going to be starting for you? Yes, I would, because I think he's got the ability to get on base. And Springer's kind of showing at this stage he's probably a bottom of the order hitter. However, coming out of the chute, I'm going to go back to Springer. I'm going to see what he's got. I'm going to see if there's any magic left because the guy is a veteran and savvy, and Wagner could, melt under that kind of heat too. So, I'd like to not put that pressure on a Wagner. I'd like to start him in the bottom of the order, even though my eye is putting him at the top of the order.
Yeah, I mean, what you talk about, there's more to it than on the field. I think starting the season after spring training with George Springer in the leadoff spot is a natural thing to do. The other problem I've got is if Will Wagner, and I think could be an on-base machine by the time he's a veteran. But if you're going to start out the year platooning him against left-handers, sit him against left-handers, then all of a sudden you've got a question mark again every time he sits of who's going to bat leadoff. And I think consistency in a lineup is important. And like if you're going to put Springer there every time that Will Wagner sits, I don't think that that's a great solution. I think I've got Wagner in as a DH later down in the lineup, but let's go 4, 5, and 6. I got Guerrero. No, I got Santander, Jimenez, and Kirk.
Guerrero. No, 4, 5, 6 is Guerrero, Santander, Jimenez. No, sorry, you're right.
Yeah, so Guerrero to me, third place hitter.
Yeah, no, I got you. My bad.
Santander, Jimenez, and Kirk.
God, I mean, you got Jimenez hitting fifth. I mean, Lord have mercy. That's scream 75 wins. No. Like again, okay, that's when I'm gonna give a shot to I'm gonna bump up Kirk or Wagner a little bit, move Jimenez down a little bit. Now, the as you mentioned, the concern with putting Kirk up there is it just the clogs the base pass. I mean, if he gets on them, you know what I mean? So
well, you're hoping he does.
Yeah, for sure. And I like him, but oof.
Well,
fifth. I mean,
yeah, if I moved Wagner into the fifth spot, which is reasonable, I'll buy that. But if I moved him into the fifth spot, then I would have to move Jimenez to 6 and Kirk to 7 because I don't want, like, Jimenez is one of your two guys with the ability to steal bases. And, he's not going to hit extra base. He's not going to get extra base hits up the gap. Kirk is going to clog the bases if he's on, and you're hoping he is on. So I got to keep Jimenez ahead of Kirk wherever.
I agree with that.
Order.
I agree with that.
So that's why I got him batting fifth. That seems like an unlikely spot. Besides, I like I'm one of the few people who like Jimenez's bat. I think he can contribute in that lineup. Makes contact. He runs the bases well. I think he could be more of an offensive. And obviously the Guardians did because they gave him a contract that gets bigger and bigger as we go along. But
then he immediately stopped hitting.
Maybe I could be a Guardians front office guy with that attitude.
That's right.
So that's 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8, 9. I got Wagner at DH, Clement, and Varsho.
I like that. For me, I move Wagner up to 5, bump those guys down. Jimenez 6, Kirk 7, and then I agree, Clement, Varsho. I like your reasoning with Varsho. Go ahead and explain that.
I mean, Varsho would be like a second leadoff hitter batting ninth. He'd be that guy that if he gets on base can do the job, but only he'd be guaranteed one fewer at bat than the real leadoff guy, which is all he deserves because his bat has not responded 100%. But he can lay one down and move somebody over into scoring position for the top of the order if he
can run.
Required. You're not afraid to have him try and steal a bag because even if he makes the third out, the top of the order is coming up to start the next inning. So
top of the order. I mean, in theory, the top of the order.
In theory,
yes. Yeah. I know what you're thinking.
But yeah, so what that shows, because you go Santander, wow, what an addition. but then when you look at it in the light of day, there's still holes in that lineup. There's
Well,
no,
what it tells me is this is a bad lineup, and that's after adding Santander. And like I said, I loved adding Santander. Boy, this isn't enough. And if they're done like I think they are, it's just not going to get it done. Like it's just you got to pray and hope. Springer bounces back. Bo, who I think will. Jimenez and Wagner gives you something. I mean, it's not impossible. You know, nothing's impossible. But boy, it just doesn't stack up to other lineups. I mean, that's clear. It
yeah,
just
I mean, you need Clement to perform like he did. You need Varsho to emerge and become an offensive force, which he's not. You need Wagner to be for real. You need Kirk to bounce back. You need Jimenez to step it up to what he was 3 years ago. You need Santander to make more contact and
well, and like I said,
put home
and
runs again. And you need Bowen Springer to bounce back. That's
well,
too many ifs.
and the thing that nobody ever considers is you need Santander and Guerrero. Just assume that's a given. The good performance is a given, and these other guys are gonna
Yeah.
bounce back. There's
Yeah.
no guarantee
None of them
Vladdy's
are
gonna have a
gonna,
Vladdy year.
there's no regression anywhere
Right.
according to
It's all
this.
positive regression. Only
Right.
positive regression. So, I mean, it's you're asking a lot with this lineup, and I think you know there's it's hard to defend that bottom of the order and any level. So hopefully there's another edition coming somewhere, and maybe there is a trade coming. I don't know. That's the avenue I think you've got to be wary of or waiting for.
Yeah. So free agency is different from a trade. You're thinking that they could still trade if it's an equal for equal
right.
contract situation,
Yep. Fill a need, you know.
or somebody who's under club control, maybe first year of ARB, that type of thing that you could fit into your budget.
Right. Let's see if they can pull something off. So,
So the conference call with Santander and Ross Atkins, if they ever have a statue outside the ballpark of Ross Atkins, it will be him with his hand out waiting for somebody to quit ignoring him and to shake it. Santander was putting on his uniform top and Ross had his hand out on the Zoom call. And I'm going, oh my God, that's awkward.
yeah.
But
Leave him hanging.
yeah,
Oh
leave
my
it
God,
there.
that's class.
So he said,
Ross Atkins statue.
Santander said some interesting stuff. I mean, the question was, did you talk to Vlad? And he did talk to Vlad a couple of times, and every
Yes,
time he did talk to Vlad, but it wasn't something set up by the ball club. It was organic, and it was like, Toronto, you got to come to Toronto. The guy who was apparently the difference maker was Victor Martinez, who fans who were watching on TV and fans who remember Victor from the Cleveland Indians, who's a pretty damn good hitter.
damn good switch hitter.
That fellow Venezuelan like Santander. And Anthony said that was the conversation that got him seriously thinking about Toronto. Victor, who was, fans see him in the dugout like maybe once every 4 series during the regular season, and he's a fixture at spring training as their fourth or fifth batting coach. So, which is a big part of how this game has changed.
Is that how far down the totem pole we're going? Like, you got to talk to a guy who's never played here.
Plus, he
Did
said,
Vladdy say, "Come play with me for 1 year"?
no, he just
Can't
said,
wait.
Toronto, you got to be in Toronto, according to the
It's going to be
translation.
an epic year while I'm here.
I heard the word Toronto more in Hector LeBron's answer than I heard in Santander's answer. But he also said that he loves hitting at Rogers Center, especially since and I'm assuming because there's less foul territory, but he said the batter's eye is tremendous in terms of him being able to see the ball. He says it's a great hitter's ballpark and that Toronto was his favorite road city. And now it's his favorite home city. He didn't say that. I'm adding that. So,
Well, and I believe all that. I mean, Toronto is often the favorite road city of many athletes, many sports. You know what I
yeah.
mean? They love coming
Yeah.
here. So,
Oh, for sure. I mean, basketball,
yeah, I
uh,
get it.
basketball, baseball, whatever, hockey. You know, hockey, there's so many that come from the GTA that it's a
Yeah, yes, different
situation.
for sure.
Um, so now we got uh, a discussion on the fact that the top five, this is our top five list, the top five Blue Jays total value contracts, and we're expecting that if Vlad signs, it'll blow these out of the water.
Well,
But it's a
clearly.
reason for Vlad needing to sign, or them needing to sign Vlad. The top five contracts are now all on this year's roster, which is, you might expect it.
Yeah,
You've
yeah, of
you've
course.
got George Springer at 140 million. From 21 to 26 was his contract. Jose Barrios 131 million, which is 2022 to 28, and he's got an opt out, but we don't include that. Gosman 110 million from 22 to 28. Jimenez, with what's left on his contract, and this seemed to stun you when we were talking before before the podcast. Jimenez still has 100.5 million left for 25 to 29 seasons, and then the fifth is
The
Santander at
fourth richest
19
contract.
the fourth
Jimenez is the fourth richest contract in Blue Jays history.
yeah, with what's
That's
remaining. That's not even the
what's
2 years.
remaining.
That's
That's
not even the
that's
2 years that he's already had.
that's just wild to me. Like that's unbelievable.
My belief, and give me your reaction on this, my belief is that the Blue Jays are so proud, and Rogers ownership and Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins so proud of being in the same fish tank with the big boys, swimming with the sharks, that you got to have at least one contract, because the total value of the Springer contract ranks 89th in Major League history. 89th.
89.
And
89.
you're saying that you're one of the big boys, and your best contract is 89th?
Well,
That's
that just tells
step
you where
up.
they're at, right? I mean, so I mean, the prevailing, opinion out there is that the Blue Jays spend and they've got all this money and they're in on every, and they are, but obviously they've not spent it well because they do have a high payroll. But when the richest contract you've signed is 89th all time, you're not getting it done. You're not in the mix. You're not a big boy. You're misspending because they do have a high payroll.
Yeah.
So the money's not going to
Yeah.
good causes, as they say. You
Yeah.
know?
And choose wisely. They have not, obviously. If that, like, they're spending a lot of money. They started last season, sixth highest payroll. They were always in the top 10 of major league payrolls. So they are swimming with the big fish, but they're just not spending wisely at this point. And to be considered one of the big boys, you can't just finish third on every contract that Scott Boras has out there. You have to get a Vlad Guerrero Jr.
Yeah. Like
or the
you're
third highest.
swimming with the big fish, but you're feeding the minnows, man. You know what I mean? Like, come on. You're not getting the big fish. That's the
So,
problem.
so if Vlad blows into, like, they still have time, and I don't believe that Vlad is telling all his cronies in the Dominican that he doesn't want any deferral money and he wants it up front, and nothing's happening, because Gomez and Carlos Baerga and those guys, they have information, they have sources, but it's not the last bottom line information, because
No,
I
we've
think
seen
that
that.
they could sit Vlad down in a room and explain what the deferrals mean, explain how much money you're going to end up with, which would be the third, according to what we discussed several weeks ago, would be the third highest all-time contract, total value contract, because he's only 25. So you could pay him for this year and 14 more years. So you could make a 15-year deal, give him some opt-outs, make it for over 450, even slightly more than that. And so that the average annual value would be mid 30s, which seems reasonable for a guy of his talent and his age. Give him an opt out after 10 years. You could explain all that to him, and it could be done to me in a heartbeat before February 13th. Just because reports where they were $100 million apart doesn't mean anything to me, because that's negotiating. And when you get into that stratosphere of dollars, 100 million is chump change.
Well, and I think it's going to come down to like you asked again. You have to ask the question whether Vladdy wants to actually sign at this stage, because they haven't been able to do it. And if they do sign him, they're just going to have to meet his number. There's just not. I don't think there's any negotiation to be had. Like I just think you're going to have to suck it up now and meet his number. So can you do that? That's the question. And I think what you're talking about, we've talked about that, your contract parameters make so much sense. If it's enough at this stage. Like
Yes.
with the Soto contract, I know Vladdy's probably like what mid 30s. He's probably thinking, no, 40 is the number now,
Yeah. Well,
you know?
to me, that's bullshit,
Well,
because
okay, but
I mean, just because I can act almost as well as Brad Pitt doesn't mean I get Brad Pitt money. It's how much
you're
money he
60,
brings into the
60% of Brad Pitt, are you?
it's how much he brings into the theater and
I've heard that too. I've heard that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But
So
fair.
so the yeah, I mean, and it comes back to what you said. Just I say that between now and February 13th, February 15th, first day, they could sit him down, explain everything. But it comes back to what you've always been saying, is that this should have been done 2 years ago. This
At
should have been
least.
done last year, should have
At
been
least.
done the last off season, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're right about that. And could it have been done?
Right. And the answer is it couldn't. I guess they tried. And there's a reason your two stars are unsigned. There's a reason for it. So you just can't get to this point and let that asset slowly devalue, because even if you want to move the asset now, it's not near what it used to be worth. You know what I mean? So the clock's ticking. Now, this is tremendous theater. I mean, as the 13th approaches, it's going to be the conversation every day. And people show up to spring training before that. So, it'll be interesting to see how the brass, how available they are, and the conversations that are had. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's great. So
Do you believe that the addition of Santander could slightly change Vlad's mind on ever signing here? Because now, I mean, we've talked about the reality of this still not being a 90-win team because of you're hoping for too many improvements and bounce backs in that lineup. But do you think the addition of Santander for 5 years might help if they sat down with Vlad now and negotiated, and they say, see, good faith, we brought some help in for you, and Bo's going to bounce back. You're going to be huge, and this guy is going to be batting behind you in the order for the next 5 years.
I'll say it doesn't hurt, but I'll say no at the same time. It doesn't hurt, but I don't think that's going to change how Vladdy's viewed his entire experience within the organization, and where his position is on his value and what he wants from them. I don't think it changes that. So it doesn't hurt. That's for sure. If they get to where he's at, maybe that's a slight consideration, but I don't think it turns anything for him. You know,
So at the conclusion of this episode, we'll go into what they need now. And anyone who's listened to this whole podcast knows where we stand. They're not going to sign a big ticket item anymore. They could make a trade, but how about free agency? They still need a second catcher. They still need one more back, because DH and third base are
right?
sort of
Look at
black
the lineup. We
holes
just
of,
went through it.
yeah,
Yep, yep. They need another batter.
third base, and one starting pitcher, because that's been since day one of the offseason. That's been something they've been looking for, and they made a pitch, if you'll pardon the pun, for all the big guys. But now there's still a lot of guys that could help at the back end of the rotation, fourth or
Right.
fifth. So
Right.
are we together on the feeling that catcher, one more hitter, and a starting pitcher are pretty much the areas of need, and that they're not going to go big?
Agreed. Because even and they need to add to the bullpen, but you can't. They'll have to do the throw stuff at the wall theory at this point and focus. I agree. Those are the areas that need addressing if you're going to be a legit playoff contender. Now, can they? And like I said, well, you can add a catcher. I mean, they just added
Uh,
one, but
so under the radar on Wednesday, and we're recording Thursday morning. Under the radar on Wednesday was the invitations to spring training of Richard Lovelady, a left-hander to complement Little. They're
wasn't
looking
that your pseudonym? Didn't you go by that
Little
on the
Lovelady.
road?
So
People couldn't find you in the hotel.
they got the Little Lovelady combination from the left side if you think he's going to make the team. And then Christian Bethencourt, who is a good defender, but those are a dime a dozen in terms of backup catchers. And he's not a guy that you want in there for 60 or 70 games, which you're assuming Alejandro Kirk is
Correct.
going to need as a backup catcher. So
Right.
the signings yesterday don't really solve anything.
No, they do not. Bethencourt, maybe in an emergency, he can catch. So that if you need a guy to just catch the baseball, throw guys out, you're okay. But you need a better option there, and I think they can find one. There are guys you can find. You know what I mean? They're kind of a dime a dozen too, right?
Yeah.
A good fielding catcher who can turn, run into one every now and then and hit 210, 220
Yeah.
in
And
60 games. Yeah.
And I mean, you got to trust that one relief pitcher out of your spring training 40-man roster and invites is going to step up and be able to do the job. You can't just go out and keep signing other teams' players, showing no faith in your own farm system.
Well, and they frankly don't have any other option anyway. So they're going to have to not trust, hope for that.
Yeah.
So
So
it's just got to happen.
you got six guys that are solid. These guys are going to be on your major league bullpen. So you need to look for two more. And I'm not even including Zach Pop in that six. So Zach Pop's there, plus the band of brothers out there that are
Right, right,
looking for the
right.
wave from Santander 44 times.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so we'll go to the final segment now, and you're smiling on this one. The NFL,
Hey,
NFL
baby, late
championship,
charge.
2 more weeks of the season, uh, ending with the Super Bowl in New Orleans. Hopefully, the snow has stopped in New Orleans by that time. Um, so last week, Mal was 3-1, and all of a sudden has zoomed to 25-21 against the spread
Yeah,
for the season.
that's right.
And Griff was 2-2 and is 27-19. But I had such a big lead over you, and I think you've probably been like 12-3 over the last 5 weeks.
So I figured at this stage you're going to just make me pick first and then mirror my picks, right?
No, hell no.
That's
No, that would
just to
be
maintain that 2 game lead.
that would be cheesy. I'll pick first, and then you can go the opposite if you want to.
Okay.
The two games on Sunday, I got you check me on the point spreads that I'm using because you won a game because you corrected my point spread last week. So
Well, yeah, to the right one.
right. We got the Commanders +6 at the Eagles.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have got to go. I've been riding the Commanders almost weekly when we were only doing 3 games each. I got to go with the Commanders. I think that it's time for a rookie quarterback who's no longer a rookie quarterback to reach the Super Bowl. I mean, he's been through so much and won so many close games and had so many fourth quarter drives to win games that he's no longer a rookie. And the Eagles, if they can shadow Saquon, their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, is not 100% healthy, so he won't be the running threat that he was. So the only guy is Saquon, and I think that they have showed that they've stepped up. They went into the Lions Den and they won there.
Yeah.
And that's my pick. I'm picking the Commanders to go to the Super Bowl. And even so, the plus 6 points is like a bonus for me.
Right. You're picking them straight up. That's right. I love it. I unfortunately am going to have to do the same. I mean, the Eagles are clearly the better football team all around. I don't think there's any disputing that. If obviously they're 6 point favorites. I think there's some concerns, not just with there's concerns with Jalen Hurts' play down the stretch. The whole season he hasn't been exactly throwing the ball well. He's not getting the ball to his two elite receivers. They're relying heavily on Saquon. So I'm guessing they're going to stack the box, make Saquon try to beat them, or make Hurts try to beat them. Sorry, and just focus on shutting down Saquon. And I'm just not convinced Hurts can do that. And I think the way Daniels is playing, this game is going to be competitive. I just can't see them getting blown out. I mean, anything can happen, but I'm gonna take the Commanders as well. So I have
I
to
mean,
agree.
Commanders have been behind double-digit points many times in the first half, and you go, "Oh, this one's over," and then they come back and they score early in the third quarter, and all of a sudden it's a game, and they come back and like in the Bears situation, the guy's over talking to the crowd as they're throwing a Hail
Yes,
Mary behind.
run back. That's right. That's
He
right.
for the win. Okay, the other game, and you have a tremendous vested interest in this, is the
Yes.
Bills +2 at the Chiefs. Is that correct? Plus
Yeah.
two.
Yeah. Sure.
I'm
Sure.
going Chiefs just because they're 3-0 against the Bills in the postseason, and the referees are going to make sure that there's a roughing the passer or a late opposite side of the field holding, defensive holding, or pass interference on a questionable call. They'll make sure that that happens. And because the NFL wants Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce and Caitlin Clark, and
Yeah.
they want that whole thing going on in the Super Bowl.
You're one of them conspiracy theories theorists. Um, so if I'm trying to outsmart myself, I've often picked against the Bills. This season for a lot of reasons that I feel are valid. And even last week, I picked the Ravens. So by that note, I should try not to jinx myself and pick the Chiefs just because the Bills keep winning. But I'm going to switch it over and go with my boys. I'm going to take the Buffalo Bills plus the points. Um, I think there's very little, obviously, to choose between these two teams, and I like where the Bills' defense is at. I mean, they've got some concerns. I don't know what Milano's status is, and you know, you got Taylor Rapp. I'm not sure where he sits right now. So, but I mean, they're way better off than they have been previously in meetings. And yep, they beat them in the regular season and lose in the playoffs. I don't know. I think this is Josh's big moment, and I think if there's a blowout, I think it's only one way. I think the Bills blow out the Chiefs. I don't see the Chiefs blowing out the Bills, and maybe I'm being foolish now, but I'm going to take the Bills plus the two, and we're going to go head to head on that one. And I'm just all in now. I'm all in now, baby.
I, I never thought I'd say this, but Josh Allen is carrying the banner for white quarterbacks everywhere.
There's a lot on his shoulders.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of. Um,
Right.
so that's it for this episode, and boy, there's been a lot of news over the course of this off season that's kept us busy and kept us with topics to talk about, and we'll be back at it again next week on Exit Philosophy. And if you've missed the Terry Francona interview, go check it out on Griff's the Pitch. And it's a tremendous interview. It's on YouTube. It's posted on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. So wherever you get podcasts, find it and enjoy it. This guy's a future Hall of Famer, and it's a
Yes, he
great,
is.
great interview, if I do say so myself. And yeah, so we will be back at you next week. And Mal, thanks, and we will thank you all for listening too.
Thank you.